long as we have faith in our cause
I'm Mike.
and unconquerable willpower,
I'm Dave.
salvation will not be denied us.
And this is Between the Lines.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Is it easier for you to go and buy things in a store than it was 4 years ago?
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And we're back. Well, I'm back anyway. Dave's on vacation. Dave's in West Virginia, enjoying the weather down there. So I'm here. I'm here with you solo today. So you get a good healthy dose of Mike, and who doesn't like that, right? Last weekend we talked about the 47 Ronin, and Dave had a lot of history on that. So I encourage everyone to go back and check out those episodes. The 47 Ronin. Before that, we were doing the constitutional amendment episodes, where we kind of went over constitutional amendments 1 through I think we got up to 4. We have to do 5 yet, so when Dave gets back, we'll probably do 5. So I encourage everyone to go back and check out those episodes. You can find us on Twitter at the BTL Podcast. We monitor that. You can find us on Facebook at PA Between the Lines. We also have a Facebook group called Between the Lines. You can find us there. We have a website, thebtlpodcast.com. We encourage everyone to just come and find us, talk to us, let us know what you think, one way or another. We're open to criticism, and if you think that we should do a certain topic or something along those lines, just leave a comment and let us know. If you're watching on YouTube, appreciate it if you would just hit the subscribe button right about there, somewhere in there. Hit the little notification bell to let you know, when we're putting out new YouTube videos and when you can find our things next. We also did a reaction video to one of my favorite YouTube clips. Dave and I've seen it before. Dave had never seen the Bill Wirtz video, History of the Entire World, I guess. So I showed that to him, and we have a reaction video up on YouTube for that. So you can go ahead and check that out too. What I think we're going to talk about today is over the past week, Jesse from the podcast prior. Anyone that's been listening to the podcast for a while knows Jesse. He kind of brought to my attention that the verdict had come down for the Alex Jones defamation suit. So he kind of let me know that that's all kind of coming to a head. So I went and kind of looked and saw what was going on, and my first reaction was, how can there be a defamation suit for an opinion? Because we've covered the First Amendment, and we covered the caveats, so to speak, that come with the First Amendment. And I know that there's a lot of conservatives out there that are decrying that this is an assault on the First Amendment, and I could see their point, because at first glance, that's what it looks like. However, I've dug into some things, and as it turns out, it's not quite as cut and dry as what initially led to believe. And what I mean by that is it was his quote-unquote opinion that Sandy Hook was a hoax. He later recanted that and admitted that it was real. And it was his opinion that this was fake. And that in and of itself is not what was the heart and soul of the lawsuit. so to speak. What actually happened is a little bit more complex, as these things usually are. It goes a little bit deeper than that. So I figured I'd at least touch on this a little bit, since we've been doing the things on the Bill of Rights and so on and so forth. This kind of fits in, I thought. So headline from the alternative press is Alex Jones ordered to pay $45.2 million over Sandy Hook lies. See, this is a little bit, this right here is the part that I kind of have a problem with. They weren't lies. A lie is when you manipulate the truth to affect the outcome of something one way or another. It's being willfully dishonest. Was he being willfully dishonest? I don't know exactly what was in the text messages that were released, so on and so forth. But essentially, Texas jury on Friday ordered conspiracy theorist Alex Jones to pay $45.2 million in punitive damages to the parents of a child who was killed in Sandy Hook Elementary School, adding to the $4.1 million he must pay for the suffering he put upon them through claiming for years the nation's deadliest school shooting was a hoax. So I want to break this down because there's more to it than that. I've done some research and I've looked into the case in its entirety, and while this is the outcome, there's a lot that he could have done in order to kind of save himself from himself, so to speak. Essentially, there's a long chain of mishandling by himself and his legal team. Without getting too deep into, the legal part of all this, because I am going to try and keep this to a short episode since Dave's not here and nobody wants to listen to me ramble for an hour. But what I'm getting to here is that there's more to it on the surface. So I've done some research and I found he wasn't sued for the opinion that Sandy Hook was fake. On its face, that's what it looks like. What happened is he also claimed that the family in question, I'm not going to name them, but the family in question were crisis actors and that they were paid to pretend that this happened and so on and so forth. Essentially what they did there is they named a private person on a news program. As much as we make fun of InfoWars and their content, and some of their content, I'll be honest, some of their content's not bad. They have a couple of contributors there that do put out some good work, and it's not all just it's not all just the crazy Alex Jones conspiracy theories.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that?
Yeah, we get it, Alex. It's not all that. They do have some contributors there that aren't bad. That being said, they are considered a media outlet, and they could be considered a news outlet. And when a major media outlet names a private person and defames them, which is exactly what he did. He claimed that they did something that they may or may not do, and he couldn't prove that they were crisis actors, but they could prove that they weren't crisis actors. So, when you dabble into that area, you are causing harm to somebody, not by your words, but by their reputation. So what I mean by that is you could cause somebody to lose their job. You could cause somebody to lose their livelihood, their home, things along those lines, because they're not a major celebrity or anything like that. So what happens is you have followers of InfoWars, which probably aren't the epitome of level-headed people. I'm not saying all of them, but I'm sure just like every other media outlet, you're going to have your fringe extremes that follow you. Just like there's crazy left-wing extremists that watch CNN and NBC, the same way that there's crazy right-wing extremists that watch InfoWars and Fox News. And One American News, whatever, all these other, there's a bunch on both sides. That being said, it's going to cause those wackadoodles that are on the fringes of those ideologies to take it upon themselves to try and change the world, right? So what happened is followers of Alex Jones and followers of InfoWars started harassing this couple because they felt like they were crisis actors paid for to call an assault on the Second Amendment. And that's usually what results when these tragedies happen. Is the first thing that happens is they say that we need to ban the guns. So it's easy to draw a conspiratorial line, however you want to say it, between these incidents and gun control laws. So I see where he's going with this, but he is definitely a whack job. So what I want to get at is where he damaged their reputation. So they had people following them, harassing them at home, harassing them at their jobs, harassing their kids, if they had any more kids. I know that they were harassing them. I don't know if they had other kids besides the one that was tragically killed at Sandy Hook. Again, that's why I'm not naming the family, because they've honestly been through enough and they don't need any more attention than they've already gotten. Not that our podcast is huge or anything, but what I mean is there's more to it. Not only that, besides him targeting a single family, the other mistake he made was hiring the worst law firm in the history of law firms. And it's going to take me a minute. I'm just going to bring up and see if I could find out the name of that law firm. Pittsburgh area lawyers. A lot of dead. I'm sorry. Normally I have another person here that can talk while I'm looking this stuff up. I can't find the name of the law firm. It should be very easily found. But what they did was not only, I'll get to the bombshell part of it here in a second, but not only did they mess up in pretrial. There were issues with discovery, and there were issues with a number of procedural things that you need to go through when you're going to trial or any really kind of case. So initially, when you start a legal proceeding, there's jury selection, and then before any of that even starts, there's a process that you go through called discovery and disclosure. I'm no legal expert, so don't ever take anything that's on this channel as legal advice or anything like that. I just know parts of the legal procedure and things like that. What happens is during discovery, both sides have to give up whatever they're going to use during the trial. So if they intend to call a witness, the defense has to provide the plaintiff with the, because this is a civil case, not a criminal case, it's not a prosecutor, it's a plaintiff. So The person bringing the lawsuit has to give a list of all their witnesses. The person defending themselves against that lawsuit has to give a list of all their witnesses. All the evidence that's going to be used and exhibits have to be disclosed so that they can be verified and confirmed by both sides. There can't be any surprises, anything like that. That's the great part about our legal system, is that everything has to be out in the open. There can't be any secrets. There can't be any anonymous witnesses or anything like that. There can be, but in very very rare cases, like when a minor is sexually abused and things along those lines, they do allow minor children to remain anonymous and their testimony to be private, so that it's not exposed. They don't have to, not in that way, but they don't have to have themselves exposed that way. That's the only term I can think of to describe it. So there are certain limitations where witnesses are left anonymous, but there have to be pre-approved by the judge, agreed to by both parties, and generally it's a criminal proceeding and not a civil proceeding where those anonymous things happen. Anyway, during this discovery process, the lawyers withheld documents, didn't give up the stuff that they needed in order to what word am I? Man, I am out of it today. To comply. Man, I don't know what's going on. I just can't come up with words today. In order to comply with the requirements of discovery, you have to give whatever the plaintiffs request within reason. So in this case, they asked for web analytics and things related to the popularity of the website because of the statements made and how many people saw the statements made by Alex Jones about the parents from Sandy Hook and the crisis actors and it being a hoax and all that. They never provided the analytics that were required. So eventually it gets to a point where the judge just says, okay, the plaintiff wins by default because none of the requirements of discovery have been met. So you didn't comply with discovery, therefore there can't be a fair trial. Therefore, I have to side with the plaintiff, because if you don't give me what is required for a fair civil trial, we have to assume that you're not going to be above board with anything else. So they lost the entire trial. They didn't lose on their merits. They lost simply because the lawyers for the other side couldn't get the documents that were needed and the data to the plaintiff in a timely manner. And that's like rule number one in any trial, is discovery and disclosure. So that I blame wholly on the law firm. But even beyond that, even if it would go to trial, he would have lost, in my opinion, even though I consider myself a conservative independent. I don't really consider myself a Republican anymore, but we've had that discussion on the podcast before. I feel like I'm better served being my own person and not representative of a party. But that's neither here nor there. Even though I align with a lot of the ideals that those complaining about this align with, and I'm a big fan of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and the First Amendment, it just doesn't apply here. And for those of you that argue, there's no difference between what the family of Sandy Hook and the family of these children are suing for. There's no difference between what they're doing and what Nick Sandmann did to CNN and the Washington Post, and what Kyle Rittenhouse is eventually going to do to CNN and Donald Trump is suing CNN and MSNBC and the Washington Post and all these outlets. There's no difference. President Trump is going to have a harder time because he's a public figure. Public figures have a hard time proving defamation because that's the point of being a journalist, is to hold power to the fire, and to expose things that should be exposed. And if you protect public figures the same way you protect private citizens, then it's easier for them to weasel out of things that should be exposed. And if President Trump ended up where he did do anything wrong and there was criminal activity, he should be held to account just like anyone else. No one is above the law in this country. Nobody. I don't think that he did do anything criminal. I've said before on the podcast that it was stupid sending a bunch of people up to the Capitol as charged as the emotions were that day. You could have deduced easily that something was going to go awry. So the judgment was wrong, but bad judgment isn't against the law. I don't think he thought that I don't think he knew prior that was what was going to happen. And if he did, and it comes out that that's true, then he should be held to account. I'm not going to try and sit here and act like I supported President Trump to a point where there's nothing that he could do that would change my mind. I'm not one of those. I support his policies. I liked everything that he did. As a person, he's kind of skeezy in some places and kind of honorable in others. The things that he did for New York City was great. I'm starting to rabbit trail. Back to Alex Jones. My point is there's no difference between the families of Sandy Hook suing Alex Jones and InfoWars as a media outlet for defamation than what Nick Sandmann and Kyle Rittenhouse are doing to CNN. CNN and MSNBC and the Washington Post and all those places fragrantly disparaged and smeared and besmirched, I love that word, Kyle Rittenhouse and Nick Sandmann. Sandmann already won. It was proven that the entire narrative around the Covington kids was completely false, and he was not the antagonizer, and he did what most people would do. He stood peacefully and smiled in the face of pressure to do otherwise. They were trying to antagonize him into violence, and he stood there and held his ground peacefully with a smile on his face. It could be pictured as smug if you want to, but you're just painting a narrative at that point. He did nothing wrong, and he got compensated for it, as he should. He got more compensation than what the Sandy Hook kids did, but I don't think they'll see a dime of the $49 million anyway, because Alex Jones just filed for bankruptcy. So what are they going to get? You can't get blood from a stone. There's no weight behind a civil lawsuit the same way that there is weight behind a criminal, like a criminal proceeding has the weight of the law behind it. They could put you in jail. Civil cases aren't like that. The other thing is the law firm not only messed up on defamation, but during discovery, it was found out that they sent the entirety of Alex Jones's cell phone contents to the other side. It's alleged, I don't know what was in the contents of those text messages and emails and whatnot, but it's been alleged that the contents of the phone contradict Alex Jones' testimony on the stand, which would mean he perjured himself. And if that's the case, he is going to be held criminal, because even though it's a civil case, perjury is still a thing. The reason you do it in a courtroom is because the courtrooms in this country are the only place in the country where you can be forced by threat of legal action forced by compulsion of the law. I can't remember what the term is, but you can be compelled to tell the truth. You can't be compelled to be a witness against yourself. That's the Fifth Amendment that we're going to get into. But you can be compelled by a judge in a civil case and in a criminal case. You can be compelled to testify and compelled to tell the truth. If it's found that you're not telling the truth during a court proceeding, then you will be held in contempt and charged with perjury. And that's the way it should be, because otherwise, how can there be a system of justice if there's no truth? If truth can't be forced by the threat of the law, that's what it is, in threat of perjury or something like that. You sign an affidavit that you're swearing to tell the truth under threat of perjury. So that means if you're not telling the truth and we find out, you're going to prison. So if it's found out that he perjured himself, then he should go to jail. I have no sympathy for Alex Jones if he breaks the law. I have no sympathy for anyone if you break the law knowingly. And his lawyers should be disbarred on many accounts. One, because they couldn't comply with discovery, which isn't a disbarable offense. You just lose your case and you're going to be seen as a horrible lawyer. Where they should be disbarred is where they sent the wrong incriminating information to the plaintiffs. They did a huge disservice to their client, whether it was intentional or not. That's a huge disservice to your client, and lawyers can't behave in that way. They need to be held account, and they should be disbarred for that alone. But if they knowingly allowed him to perjure himself on the stand, then, which they had to because they had the text messages, so they obviously disclosed those text messages to the plaintiffs, so they obviously knew that that he was perjuring himself on the stand. So any lawyer that would allow their client to perjure themselves should not be a lawyer. That's just not the way this justice system works. So that being said, I really don't see an avenue where Alex Jones comes out of this without going to prison. And rightfully so if he perjured himself. Now, if it turns out that, his whatever was in those documents doesn't perjure himself or things along those lines, then his lawyer should still be disbarred just for their malpractice of law, because that's ridiculous. You can't have law firms out there and lawyers that don't know simple procedure and how to follow things, how to submit. They could have submitted continuances and requested continuances, more time to get the data. There's several avenues they could have gone, but at some point the judge, when I researched it, the judge was just like, "Look, I've given you plenty of time, and you haven't complied. You refused to comply." And so they just got a default judgment. Alex Jones in the one proceeding didn't even bother showing up. So I find I have a real hard time finding any sympathy for Alex Jones in this situation. I think that's a good place to end it. I don't have much more to contribute other than that. So just look into what's going on. But to all those conservative folks out there that are upset about the Alex Jones verdict, you're really not looking at it objectively, and you're really not looking at it, fact-based and not emotional-based, and you're kind of letting your biases show. On the other side of the coin, those of you on the left side of the spectrum that are, running a victory lap for this, don't forget Nick Sandmann and his victory, and Kyle Rittenhouse and his upcoming lawsuits against CNN, it's going to come out that they're going to lose. CNN and the Washington Post already lost to Nick Sandmann. So now maybe those on the left can kind of see where those two gentlemen were coming from with their lawsuits. They were very much defamed in much the same way that the Sandy Hook victims were, and probably harassed in a far more threatening way, especially Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse had many, many, many death threats against him, and continues to have death threats against him. I wouldn't mess with the kid, just going by his history and the history he has with people that try to attack him. But that being said, you can find us on Twitter at the BTL Podcast. You can find us on Facebook at PA Between the Lines. Visit our website, thebtlpodcast.com. Let us know how we're doing. Watch us on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Give us a like if you like our videos. Anything that you can do to kind of help boost us up would be great. We'd like to keep doing this. We like talking to you guys. Hopefully you guys like listening to us. As always, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.